Today we're going to talk about factors, multiplication, and fact families. Okay, so first we're going to go over some vocabulary. Factors are numbers that are multiplied together to find a product. Okay, so we are multiplying two factors or three factors, whatever it is, to get to a certain product. The product is the answer to a multiplication equation. So what we're going to be talking about today is fact families. And what fact families are, usually, is you would start with an end, you would start with the product. So let's start with 28 as an example. Okay? So what we could do is we need to figure out what do you multiply together to get to the product of 28. So this is our product. Okay? Well, what can we multiply together to get to 28? With an 8 at the end, we know that it's an even number because 8 is an even number. So we know that 28 is an even number. Because we know that 28 is an even number, that means that you could multiply 2 by something to get to 28. Okay? So what we're going to be talking about is what can we multiply 2 by to get to the answer of 28. So 2 times something equals 28. Okay? Now, we are finding the missing factors. So 2 times 14 is actually equal to 28. So then we would put 14 there. So in the product of 28, or for the product of 28, there are some factors that can go into that. So 2 and 14 are factors of 28 because 2 times 14 equals 28. Now there's another factor of 28 that we can use as well. Okay, so I'm going to erase this example. We're going to keep this down here because we're going to figure out what times what is equal to the product of 28. So we're figuring out two missing factors. So what you can do is you could think 3. Does 3 times anything equal 28? So we could look at a multiplication chart. We could rote count by 3s. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30. So because we don't say 28 when we're rote counting by 3s, 3 is not a factor of 28. So now let's think about the next number, 4. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28. We said 28. So what that means is that 4 is a factor of 28. Okay? So let's rote count together in our 4s to get to 28. So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28. So 4 times 7 is equal to the product of 28. Okay? So these are factors of 28. So if you were to be asked a question, because this is the second example that we did, okay, if you were asked a question, what are the factors of 28, you would list all of them. So the earlier example was 2 and 14. And then now we have 2 more factors that we can add to this list, 4 and 7. Okay? Now you can still go through and rote count by 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. It's not a factor. 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. 6 is not a factor. 7s, 7, 14, 21, 28. But so 7 times 4 is 28 if we flip these numbers around. But since we already have both 4 and 7 equal to 28, we don't need to change the numbers around. So when we're looking at multiplication problems, okay, let's say we wrote it as 7 times 4 equals 28. Whether you have the equation written as 7 times 4 equals 28 or 4 times 7 equals 28, it's still equal to the same thing. So you don't have to list 4 and 7 2 times. Does that make sense? All right, so now let's talk about fact families. Now that we've talked about the product and the factors, okay? I'm going to erase my whiteboard. All right, so a fact family is three numbers that you can multiply or divide together to get to the same product. Okay, so we're talking about multiplication. And the reason why I brought up division is that multiplication and division are the inverse operations of each other, which kind of means they're the opposite. So multiplication and division are called inverse operations. Okay, so what that means is that they are the opposite of each other, basically. And that's important to know in 5th grade, that multiplication and division are inverse operations. It's also important for you guys to know that addition and subtraction are inverse operations of each other. So you're going to see how that works right now. So in our example of 27, so we're going to draw, on your assignment, it looks like a little house, okay? And in the roof has the product in there, okay? So that's the final, that's the number that we want to get to, so 28, okay? And then it also looks like this. You have this times this equals this box times this box equals this box. Okay, now we're going to get into division. That box divided by this box equals something. And this box divided by this box equals something. Okay, so we talked about product. That is the answer of a multiplication product, or of a multiplication equation. A quotient is the answer to a division problem. Okay, so in this video, we're talking about a lot of vocabulary. So it's going to be very helpful for you. I don't want to write problem. I want to write equation. It's going to be very helpful for you to make sure that you're taking notes in your interactive notebook, or look back at Google Classroom so you can fix up your notes, okay? So first we're going to talk about the multiplication, okay? We need to figure out, this is the answer that we want to get to. So 28 is going to automatically go in those boxes. So we need to figure out what we can multiply here to get to 28, okay? All right, so we did that in our last example. So we know that we could use one of two options, okay? So I'm going to erase this part right here, just so I have a little bit more room, okay? So we have a product of 28. So this is the product, okay? And our factors of 28 were 2, 14, 7, and 4. Because 2 times 14 equals 28, and 7 times 4 equals 28. On the fact family, I only want you to pick one set to make a family. So we're going to choose the numbers 28, 7, and 4. Okay, only 3 numbers. So this is our family. If you want to think of it, you know, these are what we're going to multiply to get to this answer. Because remember, this answer is in the roof of the house, okay? Okay, so now let's write it in. So as I said earlier, we're going to use 7 and 4 because 7 times 4 equals 28. So 7 times 4 equals 28. And remember earlier in the video, I said we could flip those numbers around and say 4 times 7 equals 28 because they're the same thing. So now we're going to look at division. And our answer, this 28, which is the biggest number, is going to now go in your very first box. okay, because we're taking something big and we are grouping it into smaller groups, okay? So now what we can do, because this is a fact family, is we're going to use 4 and 7 in these two equations, but we have to figure out which one goes in which box, okay? So if we say 28 divided by 4, okay, that means that the only other number that we have listed right here that we haven't written down here is 7. So if we were to divide 28 little counters into 4 groups, there would be 7 counters in each group. Now what we're going to do, since this is our last time, we're just going to flip those numbers because, again, multiplication and division are the inverse operation of each other. So whether it says 28 divided by 4 equals 7, now we're going to try to divide 28 by 7. So we have 28 counters. We're going to split those counters into 7 groups. And what that means is that there's going to be 4 counters in each group. So the goal of fact families is you are only talking about 3 numbers. If you would rather choose 2 and 14, that's fine. You can do that. But then in your little box, you would say 2 and 14, okay? And then we would just change this out. So we would change out 2 times 14 equals 28. 14 times 2 equals 28. 28 divided by, we're going to look at this example to make sure we're including all of our fact family numbers. So 28 divided by 14, the only number that's missing out of this one down here is 2. So 28 divided by 14 equals 2. Now down here, 28 divided by 2 equals 14, okay? So remember, you're only picking 3 numbers, the answer and 2 products. So that's the purpose. We want to make sure that we are talking about a specific fact family of 3 numbers, the answer and 2 products.